Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the GW Basketball Insiders. David Korn and Leo Momurku here, and we have a special guest here, Riley Frain, who's going to be talking some transfer portal with us. He does some great work at the transfer portal, at the Portal Report, and at a bunch of other different sites. And we just thought, with all the action that GW's had in the portal so far, and sort of how exciting it's been to see the team sort of get rebuilt and restocked this way, to have sort of someone with a bit more of a national perspective in to really give us the lowdown on what exactly has been going on. So Riley, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, of course, David, Liam, thank you so much for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. I love the work you guys do. Obviously, I'm an A10 guy myself, so I certainly love the A10 coverage, the GW coverage. But yeah, no doubt it's been a busy offseason for Coach Caputo and his staff. So I'm excited to kind of dive into some of it and get to talk about some of the additions with you guys.
Yeah, so I think the first, just to kick this off, I know with the Portal Report, you guys do a lot of these rankings, and at one point this offseason, the GW was ranked 5th in the country with their transfer portal. They're based on your rankings, they're 5th in the country. That caught a lot of attention. So I was wondering if you could just sort of walk through what you've seen from GW and maybe sort of explain how that ranking came to be, where they're standing sort of right now, and what's made this such a good offseason for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I probably tweeted that out about a month ago now. And as you guys both know, I mean, the transfer portal is updating day by day.
Yeah.
So that ranking was sort of something that stood in the moment, but definitely just as sort of the nature of the transfer portal has been, as teams are picking up more commitments and stuff, and they've started to fall in the rankings. But just to give you guys sort of an overall perspective of, at the Portal Report, we rank every Division I program's incoming transfer class over the off season. Pretty much those rankings are based entirely off of production. So it's sort of the average production you guys are bringing in, minus the average production you guys gained or lost. And so as of right now, GW sits 18th nationally, which is really good. That's going to put you guys second in the A10 behind George Mason, who ranks 8th nationally. But to be top 20 is incredible. I mean, let's look at some of the other programs that are sort of surrounding George Washington at the moment. You've got national powerhouses like Michigan. You've got transfer portal powerhouses like USC, who it seems are recruiting every single player available in the portal nowadays. Teams like Ole Miss, teams like Purdue, teams like Louisville, who found a ton of success in the transfer portal, and George Washington sort of falling right in the middle of all those teams I mentioned. So going back to my point, top 20 nationally, a really exciting spot to be. I'm sure we'll get to kind of breaking down some of the specific additions they're bringing in this offseason. But just overall, from a class ranking standpoint, we currently have them in the top 20. And I think if you're GW looking, and just a fan of the A10 in general, being inside of that top 20 nationally is a sort of a really exciting spot to be right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know there's a lot of GW fans and even people inside the program that are really, really excited about the talent that they brought in. So kind of heading into this offseason, there was kind of a belief that just due to how the revenue sharing worked out and the type of school that GW is and the fact that there's no football, put them at kind of a bit of an advantage compared to some other schools, even within the A10, I think. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, kind of what role do you think the whole revenue sharing played? We've kind of heard that they have more money to kind of spend on, on players and stuff like that than they have in the past. So what role has revenue sharing played this offseason for GW and I guess for teams across the A10? And the country?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of hit the head on the nail on the head there, Liam. The important thing is we're starting to see sort of the benefit that revenue sharing is playing for schools that don't, have a football program or maybe aren't investing a ton into football. When you look at the A10, and there are a couple teams in the A10 who do have football programs. I think Richmond's, football program is pretty prominent as far as, maybe non-FCS programs go. I'm not too plugged in with the college football scene. I don't know very well, but I just, you're seeing teams like GW, like George Mason, like VCU, who aren't investing a ton of that money in football, find some early success. I mean, if I go back and I touch on some of TPR's top 10 rankings, some of the teams we're seeing inside that top 10 are teams who aren't necessarily very football focused. St. John's obviously finding a lot of success in the portal this offseason. I mentioned George Mason's in my top 10, is in the Portal Report's top 10, excuse me. And you go down the rankings and GW being right there at 18, I think it makes a lot of sense. And so the A10 is seeing the benefit of that, not having a ton of football to pay off. It's a mid-major conference at its heart. I love mid-major basketball, and I know some people will argue with people on that, but the A10's a mid-major conference, and so to see some of these teams ranking inside, the top 10, top 20, top 30, incoming transfer clashes nationally, I think it speaks to sort of how revenue sharing has benefited a conference like the A10. And I don't think it's something that's going to last forever, but maybe over the next couple seasons, we're going to see conferences, schools, programs, whatever it may be, who don't have to fund a ton of football are going to, maybe get a leg up on some of the other schools who have to focus a lot of money in that department.
I mean, I know that's what these administrations think, both in individual schools and at the A10 level, based on conversations that I've had. I know that they believe that the lack of football as a conference sport could be a huge asset, and I think it's showing that right now. Is that, from your understanding, is that what these like student athletes are thinking as well? If they're making a decision to maybe choose an A10 school over a higher major, or is that something that's going through their minds where they think like basketball is a center of attention that's been like a real asset to the A10 and GW?
So I don't know if that's something they're necessarily thinking about. I think when it comes to football, a lot of times you look at the biggest schools in the country, like Texas, like Oklahoma, and when they have football, that sort of creates better opportunities to generate revenue, to generate NIL opportunities, to generate marketing opportunities. And I think sometimes players can look at that as an advantage. But on top of that, I think for a lot of players, it's just about, number one, finding the best place to play. And then number two, if you can getting paid, the most money possible. And so when you're looking at some of these schools who don't have to fund the football, I think that is something maybe players are taking into account. Okay, maybe this is a school where I can make a little bit of more money because they don't have to pay NIL contracts, whatever you want to call it, out to players on the football side, which is, indefinitely the more expensive sport. Football, nationally is generating more revenue than college basketball, and sort of number two, playing second fiddle to that. So I definitely think it's something that prospective student athletes are interested in, are considering. But overall, I think, sort of the allure of a bigger program who maybe has football and just has, however much money they need to kind of throw at whatever players they want. Obviously, that's sort of what's going to grab the attention of a player. But I think for someone who's looking at a school like an A10 level school, like a GW, I think that's something they're definitely considering is, hey, maybe this school, doesn't have football. I can kind of use that to my benefit. We're the center of the attention at this school. I can use that as a way to sort of to get a good deal for myself, make a little bit of money, and use it as a way to as a stepping stone to kind of broadcast my skills and maybe get a high major opportunity the next season if you have extra eligibility.
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about this JUCO decision that's given JUCO players an extra year of eligibility, and the impact that it's had on the transfer portal. GW, I believe, 2 players that have came in through the transfer portal this year who are eligible, have another year of eligibility because of this JUCO decision. So, I mean, can you explain? I'm sure that kind of maybe turned things upside down a little bit. It seems like, every month it's something new with the NCAA. And I think there's all these players that, we spoke with Trey Dinkins, and he said that he was delighted when he learned that he had a new or another year of eligibility. So what sort of impact has that had on the transfer portal this year?
Yeah, I could imagine that's sort of the mindset for all these guys who are getting an extra year of eligibility. As just like Trey Dinkins, they're excited because it's another year of college basketball, especially with the way we've seen NIL going. It's another year to potentially make a little bit of extra money and not have to go overseas, to try and continue your career. And so I think overall guys are excited about that. But sort of the impact we've seen this year is the transfer portal is hitting record numbers in terms of guys who are entering. I mean, this year alone, we had over 2,000 guys enter, which was compared to last year when we broke over 1,000 last year. But I think I don't even think we hit 1,500 last year. So to say we hit 2,000 this year, I'd have to imagine that rule has a major impact. And we're certainly seeing a lot of guys who are coming back around to the portal and saying, hey, we have the extra year because of the JUCO. Can you guys, sort of help get my name out there, help broadcast, and get me some extra attention, recruiting interest in the portal. And on top of that, I think the second reason for sort of that development, seeing so many more guys enter the portal, is we're having a lot of guys enter the portal, without eligibility. I don't know if this is something you guys were planning to talk about in a little bit, but
I was about to ask. Yeah. So I'm glad you brought it up.
Then I'll just dive right into it. But we're seeing a lot of guys enter the portal without any remaining eligibility. And the reason for that being is the NCAA is currently in a lawsuit pending players potentially receive a 5th year of eligibility. So you've seen a lot of guys enter the portal in hopes of receiving that 5th year of eligibility. At the moment, it doesn't necessarily sound like they're gonna. I don't, have any inside information on that. That's just sort of what I've been reading online and from sources like ESPN. But it seems like, that's sort of the hope, is a lot of those guys are going to be granted an extra year of eligibility. And on top of that, we're starting to see a couple of those guys commit. It's interesting. Arizona State picked up a commit the other day from a kid named Jake O'Neal, who I don't necessarily think has any, from the reports, it seems to suggest he doesn't have any extra eligibility. But Arizona State sort of hoping he gets granted that extra year with the NCAA's waiver process that's sort of being hammered out through this case right now. So I think there's still a lot to be decided there, but has only played into all the development and growth we've seen around the transfer portal this offseason.
Yeah, so I really appreciate that insight because, again, I know a lot of people listening, the transfer portal is confusing. Like, this is new. This is everyone's sort of learning on the fly. Mm-hmm. And so it is complicated. And I think I'm glad you clarified, because I was going to bring it up, because a lot of these people who are entering, the eligibility, if they really have it, is probably not. So reining it back into GW, GW brought in 5 transfers, and we've heard that they're done, even though they may have 1 or 2 extra eligibility, like scholarship spots, whatever. We've heard they're pretty much done. Mm-hmm. They're bringing in Luke Hunger, Tyrone Marshall, Gene Arangaran, Trey Dinkins, and Boo Boo Benjamin. From those guys, anyone stick out that you maybe had your eye on before they committed to GW as someone you thought could be a real difference maker wherever they ended up?
Yeah, well, let's start with Gene Arangaran. I covered him a ton last year just by nature of I live very close to Hofstra University up here in New York. And by virtue, I'm typically the A10 correspondent for Mid-Major Madness, but I do a lot of CAA work as well. And so Gene Arangaran is someone I'm very familiar with his game, and I think he's a really exciting addition for GW, because I think at Hofstra last year he was sort of tasked with being the primary guy, the number 1, and the guy who they wanted to be the number 2, Cruz Davis, who came over from Iona, sort of struggled and battled some injuries this year and showed some bright spots, but Gene was sort of the leader for that team last year. And so to get back to my main point was Gene was really successful, leading the team for the most part, but there were just certain spots where he kind of needed a little bit more help and just struggled having to be the guy who took, 10, 15 shots a night, whatever it may have been. And so I think with the move to GW, what's exciting about that is you guys have a lot of guys on the roster who can already score and contribute, and you bought in for a handful of other guys from the transfer portal who are going to be right there and hopefully solid contributors this year as well. And so I think what that brings for Gene is, he could be more of a role player, but he's already someone who's proven a really talented scorer. I'm looking at his averages right now, and he does a little bit of everything, 14.5 points per game, 5.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists. He's shooting it at 41%. And that was in a down year for Hofstra, a team that's typically very competitive in the CAA, particularly over the last couple seasons. And on top of that, he's really defensively tough as well. That's Hofstra struggled a lot last year, as I just mentioned, but they were still one of the top defensive teams in the conference. I know they finished top 5 in most of the CAA's sort of major defensive metrics. So just really excited what he can bring about it as a two-way player to GW. He does a little bit of everything. And I think as more of a role player on this roster, a roster that's got some depth to it, I think he could be a really successful piece. I like what he's going to bring.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that, David and I and some other people we're kind of tracking what GW is doing in the portal, where we kind of looked at it after they made all these additions, and we were like, okay, wait, well, who's going to, you can only put 5 players on the floor at the same time.
Yeah.
They have a lot of depth, and they have a lot of players who have kind of shown production at other places, which is really exciting. So, I mean, why don't we expand a little bit to talk about some of the other A10 schools? Because personally, GW got their business done way earlier than I thought they were going to. Like, they were finished, at this point, 2.5, 3 weeks ago. So I haven't been paying as much attention to kind of the other A10 activity that's happened since. But I mean, which A10 schools have you been most impressed with? I know you mentioned George Mason earlier, but which have you been most impressed with? And is there a team that kind of has flown under the radar that you really think that they're building something really interesting this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I'll avoid George Mason just because, as you mentioned, I did touch on them briefly, but it's been just a really exciting season, off season in the transfer portal for the A10 overall. I mean, you look at VCU and sort of the new staff and what they've been building over there, and it's really exciting. Bringing in some guys like Ahmad Noel from UConn, Jadrian Tracy over from Oregon. Obviously, Coach Martelli Jr. is bringing over a couple guys from his Bryant teams that have been really successful the past couple seasons. So we have them at the Portal Report. We have them ranked pretty highly in our transfer rankings. St. Louis not far behind them. We know Josh Schertz last offseason found a lot of success in the portal. It seems like this offseason a lot more of the same. He's bringing in Paul Otieno from Quinnipiac, a really exciting big man who can score and rebound and solid on the defensive end. Quentin Jones, who's a really solid two-way player from Northern Illinois as well. And then you asked me about maybe an underrated transfer class sort of in the A-10 there, Liam. And I don't want to sound like too much of a homer, but I think what some of the pieces my St. Joe's Hawks have added have been really exciting. If I could touch on that for a minute. They bring in a former 3-star, borderline 4-star recruit in Al Amadou from Marquette, who I thought redshirted this past year, but showed some solid flashes as a freshman. They're stealing Deuce Jones from a Big Five rival in LaSalle. I think that's a really good pickup. I know the LaSalle fans are going to be a little disappointed about that one, but excited to see him, continue his career in the city of Philly. I think St. Joe's is an exciting step up for him, and obviously he'll be an impactful piece this year. And then the last guy you got to be really excited about that they're bringing in this offseason. Not the last guy they're bringing in this offseason, but the next guy on that grouping I'm really excited for. Jaden Glover, who's coming down from the other SJU in New York City. He's coming over from St. John's. A former 4-star recruit who I know was recruited by St. Joe's at a high school and it didn't get a ton of minutes this year at St. John's. I know he struggled with some injuries, but it seems like could be a really exciting addition for St. Joe's this year if he sort of reaches his potential. And from what I understand, he would have been the highest ranked recruit in St. Joe's history. So to get him in the transfer portal a year later is not too bad. So not a lot of guys who were maybe playing impactful minutes last year between Amadou and Glover, but I think a couple under the radar guys who, if they sort of, hit some of their potential, could make St. Joe's, an interesting team next year, maybe despite some of what's going on with the coaching.
Well, you said that, not us. Anyway, so sticking with St. Joe's, one of I think the more interesting storylines in the A-10 this offseason was Xavier Brown's decision to transfer to Oklahoma, and one of the St. Joe's assistants going with him. And I think that's a trend that we're seeing a bit, where these sort of people are these external figures are sort of being included in these recruitments, maybe. And being like sort of maybe promised positions on staffs, or people are coming as like package deals. I'm not saying that happened there or anything like that, but is that a trend that you've noticed at the Polar Report, and like anything that you guys have sort of been monitoring?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think more so this offseason is maybe something you're starting to notice a little bit, and I don't know that I necessarily have a better example in front of mine than.
Yeah, I mean that's the one that's on. Yeah.
Justin Scott. I mean, you didn't mention it, so I will do it. But Justin Scott was Xavier Brown's stepdad, so the connection there just makes a ton of sense. I mean, I don't think it was surprising to me. I remember saying to some people last offseason after he had won A-10 Rookie of the Year, saying, "Hey, if you want to take a shot at Xavier Brown in the portal, you should offer Justin Scott a job." And it just made sense, that you would follow your stepdad. He was ready for a step up, and I don't think, as a St. Joe's fan, you could be too disappointed in the decision. Oklahoma's a very good program in what was the best college basketball conference in the country this past season, excuse me. And so, I think it's a really interesting step up for him, and it's certainly something I think we'll start to see a lot more of is programs saying, looking at mid-major, low-major schools and saying, hey, you have an exciting assistant on your staff. What if we bring both of you over to our high major program, and you guys could be a part of helping to build our roster for next season. So I think it's a really exciting opportunity. I think it's tough for the A-10 to see a player like Xavier Brown leave. I think people touting him as a potential pro talent, and obviously he's going to get some better experience playing in a conference like the SEC. But yeah, I definitely think, David, to your point, it's something we're going to start to see a lot more of. I won't say it's necessarily something we're tracking at the Portal Report, but maybe I'll have to suggest that. Maybe it's something we'll have to look into more of, is how that's playing out in recruiting. I'm interested.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing about the Oklahoma thing to me is, like, there were some rumors that maybe Porter Mosier wouldn't be keeping his job. Yeah. And so I kind of wonder if maybe it's all right, we're going to give you one more year. We're going to bring over, one of the best players in the A-10, and, here's an assistant coach. If you can't figure it out now, then, you're out of here. So,
and I think a pretty good assistant coach at that. But to that point, I think the interesting dynamic to all of that was not only was Porter Moser maybe being talked about as just not being fired this offseason, but it seems like he was being discussed potentially as like head coach at some other spots as well, even if he wasn't fired. Like, I remember he was thrown out there as a candidate at like Villanova, which I think interests me. And then if Justin Scott and Xavier Brown made the jump to Villanova, how does that look for St. Joe's?
Oh,
But I don't want to
bring
turn
it
this
back to
into
GW. Porter Moser, the man who recruited Benny Schroeder. Over,
there you go, right? It all circles back to the A10. It all revolves around the A10.
Yeah. So we talked about some schools that you've been impressed with in the A10 in the transfer portal. Are there any schools that you've kind of been waiting for, them to make that sort of move to impress you, or any schools that you think, at least as of now, haven't really done enough?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the one thing that stands out for me is Davidson's just been a little quiet. I like Josh Govins, who they bought in from Army. But maybe outside of that, just a couple guys coming down from high majors who weren't the most productive, maybe don't bring over the highest pedigrees. If I could touch on Josh Govins for a minute, but a really exciting big man a really exciting sort of forward wing from Army at 6'7", who was really physical, really tough for there. He can rebound, he can score competitively. The Patriot League to the A10 is a little bit of a step up, frankly, but I still think he could be a solid contributor there. And then they're just bringing in two guys, high major guys who didn't really play a ton the past couple of years. JQ Roberts coming over from Vanderbilt, who really played almost nothing this year as a freshman, and then Parker Friedensench, if I'm saying that correctly, which I am definitely not, but I gave it a shot. If a guy who spent 2 years at Wake Forest and really did not find much success at all. Never played more than, I think, 14 minutes per game about. So I'm, there's still a lot of guys left in the portal, and I could mention some of the guys who Davidson has sort of been interested in this offseason and outside of those they've recruited who are still available and who they're taking a look at. And I think Sam Brown is another guy who they're bringing in this offseason that I think is someone to be really excited about. But I'm still looking for, maybe Davidson's staff, especially with the addition of Steph Curry, which we can get into this offseason. I think he could play a big role in recruiting for them. But I'm still waiting for them to sort of make another splash outside of maybe the Sam Brown addition and the Josh Govins addition.
Sam Brown, son of a former 76ers head coach.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
But,
he played against my high school in, twice a year, every year. Cooked every single time. Dude would shoot like 70% from three. It was insane.
I'll circle it back to the A10 for you both. He was at Billy Lang's introductory press conference.
Oh, well, yeah, because Billy Lang was on his staff.
Yeah.
The Sixers. Yeah. There we go. With the Davidson, just to sort of put a bow on that, I think it's I feel like, I don't know if you agree, but I feel like once all like the COVID seniors and everything, once that's finally aged out and it's back to more of the 4-year players, I feel like they'll be in a better spot because of their whole not having a grad program and not being able to do that. So I feel like for them, they're sort of these past years, especially, they've been at a huge disadvantage, and I feel like that'll sort of come back around. I don't know if you do.
Yeah, and I think they're struggling to retain talent a little bit right now as well, as is the entire conference. But there are certainly some teams who are doing a little bit better than most. I think GW is a good example at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, Davidson, they're losing a handful of guys this year. Connor Cochera, I think, is still in the transfer portal. I don't know if he has any eligibility left. But just I know a couple guys sort of at the top of the roster in terms of production this last season are available or committed in the portal. So I think they're bringing in two guys who are going to impact the starting rotation. But outside of that, I'm maybe still waiting for them to bring in another piece or two to sort of flesh out that roster.
Yeah. So Riley, again, we really appreciate your time and your expertise in the portal and everything like that, and what you've given us. I think I just have one more here. You were just talking about retention. And like you said, GW, that's something that they've done really well throughout Chris Caputo's time with GW. When he first got in, he was basically able to retain pretty much the entire rotation. Last year he was able to retain Darren Buchanan along with the rest of the young core. This year he was able to keep Rafael Castro. What do you think? Do you think that sort of makes an impact on these guys when they're maybe looking at GW and they see that guys want to come back to play for him? And how sort of rare is that around the country for a coach to be able to continually sort of bring back his best players?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's something guys look at. Young guys, they want to build, particularly the kids coming out of high school, they want to build relationships with coaches, and I don't think anyone goes in wanting to be like, particularly not in the A10. It's a fairly high level conference. It's pretty close to the high major ranks. I don't think anyone comes into the conference saying, "Oh, I want to transfer out. I'm already looking elsewhere." I think a lot of guys come into the A10 saying, "Hey, I want to break into a starting lineup here. Like this is a conference where you can get good minutes and you can go be a pro somewhere." So I think you look at that, you look at GW and sort of who they've been able to retain over the past couple of years. And yeah, I think young guys coming out of high school and maybe with additional years of eligibility in the transfer portal are going to find value in that. Now, I think in terms of how rare that is, just from a national perspective, you don't see that a lot in mid-major basketball with all the development we've seen around the transfer portal. I can only think of, St. Joe's stands out to me in the A10 as another team that's done really well with player retention. But it seems like every other team in the conference is losing a couple players every offseason. And that's fair. It's just sort of the day and age and the nature of college basketball. But being able to keep one or two guys, three guys around and build a core off of that, I think is going to be key for mid-major programs, A10 programs moving forward. And so for GW and their staff to have had so much success doing that, so early sort of into this transfer portal development, I think is key, because it shows, not only do they know how to keep guys, not only do they know how to recruit guys, which clearly they've shown they can do in the transfer portal. It seems like, the past couple off seasons, Caputo and his staff are always bringing in at least one or two marquee guys that are catching my interest. I think that are catching the national interest. And so, being able to do that, being able to keep one or two guys and then recruit talent on top of that, and then being able to keep those guys in the door, I think that's sort of the blueprint for success at this level. And so to see what GW has been able to do that, I think, it points to hopefully that the staff is continuing to build towards something, continuing to grow. They understand sort of the nature of college basketball at the moment. And I think, they see what it takes to be successful. And as long as I think they continue to do those two things, retain talent and find guys in the transfer portal that they think fit their scheme, you're going to see this GW team continue to climb sort of the rankings in the A10 as they've done the past couple seasons.
Yep, absolutely. Next step is winning some games. So we'll see if they can. We'll see if they can do that this winter. Well, Riley, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. Make sure you check out his work. Mid-Major Madness, Portal Report. Anything else that we're missing, or is that those are the?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just give a quick shout out to for those who are interested in some of maybe the transfer portal rankings I've been talking about. You can check out our transfer portal fan tracker on our website. We're sort of tracking the transfer portal there. If you want to know who your favorite teams are recruiting, who they're committed to, what players they're maybe interested in looking at in the transfer portal, you can find sort of all that information there. We track it all there. So, for those interested in the transfer portal, just come check it out. But Mid-Major Madness, the Portal Report, lots of college basketball coverage between those two.
Awesome.
I love it. Thank you so much, Riley, for giving us some time. We really appreciate it.
Of course, guys. Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Of course.